Bill Barr, Donald Trump's former attorney general and loyal hatchet man, has enraged his ex-boss by going onto Fox and ruthlessly debunking MAGA's talking points about Trump's indictment. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe and enjoy the video. So if you're not quite sure where Bill Barr and Donald Trump stand with one another these days, I really wouldn't blame you, because it can sometimes get confusing, especially when you consider the broader context that in Trump's world, in MAGA land, loyalties and favorability almost play out like a season of Game of Thrones, where, Trump and one advisor or one supporter stand in one place at the beginning of episode 1, and then by episode 10, there have been a series of betrayals and surprising developments, and now they can't stand each other. Bill Barr, it kind of has a foot in both worlds, because this is a man who, just a bit of background. He was a conservative lawyer. I don't think he's a practicing attorney anymore. He was until he joined the Trump administration, but he served President George H.W. Bush in the early 90s as his attorney general. He was a proponent of this notion of unitary executive theory, which basically is the maximum view of presidential power within the context of Article 2 of the Constitution. It basically says when it comes to the executive branch, the president is almost all-powerful. Very little, very, 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 very few checks and balances in terms of presidential power. He espoused that view later on in his life as well, when he essentially auditioned for the role of President Trump's second attorney general in the aftermath of Jeff Sessions' firing. And he basically wrote an unsolicited, unprompted letter offering his legal perspective about unitary executive theory, which of course Trump loved, even though it went right over his head. As soon as he saw more power for me, the sitting president, Bill Barr was a shoo-in. He became Donald Trump's attorney general. He was confirmed by the Republican Senate, and by all accounts, he was an incredibly partisan, incredibly loyal member of Trump's cabinet and worked overtime to affect Trump's agenda. Then he resigned shortly after the election and before January 6th, and since then, Bill Barr has been an increasing critic of Donald Trump, particularly personally. He may have loved Trump's policies about the border and, again, a strong executive, but Bill Barr himself has become increasingly outspoken in terms of Donald Trump's character deficits. He thinks he's lazy, he thinks he's uneducated, he thinks he has low impulse control. But he's also said, even as recently as just a few months ago, that he would still vote for Donald Trump in 2024 if the choice is between him and Joe Biden. So, hence a foot in both worlds. Now, having said that, Bill Barr went onto Fox News recently, the Fox propaganda network, and did some Sunday shows, and he ruthlessly debunked many of MAGA's talking points about the recent Trump indictments. So I want to play some clips, and then we will unpack them together.
And this idea of presenting Trump as a victim here, a victim of a witch hunt, is ridiculous. Yes, he's been a victim in the past. Yes, his adversaries have obsessively pursued him with phony claims. And I've been at his side defending against them when he is a victim. But this is much different. He's not a victim here. He was totally wrong that he had the right to have those documents. Those documents are among the most sensitive secrets that the country has. They have to be in the custody of the archivist. He had no right to maintain them and retain them. And he kept them in a way at Mar-a-Lago that anyone who really cares about national security, their stomach would churn at it.
So that's the first clip, right? And that's a very point-blank, very black and white condemnation of this notion that Donald Trump is a victim. And this is coming again from Bill Barr, who has believed and still believes that Donald Trump was the victim of political witch hunts in the past. He believes, Bill Barr believes, like Donald Trump, that there was nothing to the quote-unquote Russiagate scandal, even though obviously we know that that's not the case, that there were multiple credible indictments and convictions that came out of Robert Mueller's investigation into Donald Trump's relationship with Russia. People who were involved with the Trump campaign, the Trump administration, they were credibly indicted for inappropriate contacts between themselves and the Russian government. And Mueller also laid out multiple instances of where Donald Trump probably obstructed justice, but he didn't recommend charges because, of course, Trump was the sitting U.S. president, and there's a long-standing Justice Department policy that you don't indict a sitting president. So Bill Barr is wrong there. But the fact that Bill Barr does believe something like that was a witch hunt and said so at the time and still says so now, That should establish his credibility. He believes that Donald Trump has been the victim of political witch hunts in the past. He just doesn't believe that that's the case now. So I want to play another clip here in just a second. And again, it gets even more, I should say, intense in terms of how strong Bill Barr pushes back on certain MAGA talking points. So here's another clip.
When you think about somebody like President Obama or President Clinton, the sock drawer case with President Clinton,
yes.
They'll point to these and say, listen,
so
there were
are
other
two big lies, I think, that are out there right now. One is, these other presidents took all these documents. Those were situations where they arranged with the archives to set up special space under the management, control, and security provided by the archivist to temporarily put documents until the libraries were ready. These were not people just putting them in their basement, okay? And the second thing that the president, this idea that the president has complete authority to declare any document personal is obvious. It's facially ridiculous. That opinion had to do with the distinction between official records, which are records prepared by government agencies for the purpose of government action, and personal documents as opposed to official documents, which are things prepared by the president, such as a diary or notes, which are not used in the government's deliberations. And yes, as to the second class, stuff that the president himself generates, the president has some discretion. But these are official documents. It's inarguable. The president's daily brief provided by the intelligence community is not Donald J. Trump's personal document, period.
So again, there you go. Very unambiguous, very well spoken by former Attorney General Bill Barr. And again, to whatever extent this matters, there should be quite a bit of credibility coming from Bill Barr. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't with most MAGA supporters because they believe that no matter what your history is with Donald Trump, you could have served him loyally and ferociously for decades. But if you publicly criticize him or deviate from him in one public incident, that's it. The loyalty that you demonstrated previously means nothing. So I'm sure this will be persuasive to some people, but for the vast majority of Trump's true supporters, they don't care. Bill Barr is effectively a rhino. He's disloyal. He's persona non grata to Cult 45, the MAGA movement. Now, how did Donald Trump respond to all this? Not well. This is what he said on Troth Central, his social media platform. Virtually everyone is saying that the indictment is about election interference and should not have been brought, except Bill Barr, a disgruntled former employee and lazy attorney general who was weak and totally ineffective. He doesn't mean what he's saying, it's just misinformation. Barr's doing it because he hates Trump for firing him. He was deathly afraid of the radical left when they said they would impeach him. He knows the indictment is bull. Turn off Fox News when that gutless pig is on. So again, not handling it well because, of course, Donald Trump, again, is a thin-skinned, sociopathic narcissist, malignant narcissist who can't handle criticism of any stripe. He is temperamentally unfit for the office of the presidency. He is objectively inferior in that respect to all and any potential Democratic candidate, and he should not be president in 2024. We'll see what happens, but to whatever extent this matters, again, many of Donald Trump's fiercest, harshest critics are people who used to work for him. And if you are a rational person at all, that should matter because they would know better than anybody.